Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Hello, Daily Detroit listeners, and welcome to a very special episode of Your Daily Detroit, coming to you from our studio at Techtown in the Paris of the Midwest, Detroit, Michigan. I am Jer Stays, and we have a full table today with honored guests. Of course, first I want to mention to my left, my co-host, none other than the Prince of Brightmore, Norris Howard. How are you?
That's right. The West Side's Finest back in here one more time. Very, very excited to talk about this wonderful debate that we had over the weekend that I think was really eye-opening and enlightening for many of the citizens of our fair city.
I think enlightening for our citizens, for our listeners, and for me. And to help unpack it, two people who helped put this thing together, we partnered with, first across the table from me, returning guest Orlando Bailey, Executive Director of Outlier Media. How are you?
I am amazing. How are you, Jer?
I am so glad to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then to my right, first time, Donna Davidson, who is the president and CEO of the Eastside Community Network, who has decades of experience working.
I was going to say old school in the house.
Yeah. All right. If you're old school in the house, what's at the top of the playlist?
Oh, this is good.
Oh, my goodness. I would have to say anything by Parliament Funkadelic.
I was getting ready to say,
Right.
y'all don't know Donna because
You know
she's getting ready to say
me.
Parliament.
You don't even
Yes.
have time for my playlist because...
Under the...
Okay, have you seen our shots on our banner?
Yeah, on the Authentically Detroit
On
banner.
Authentically, so I'm like the absolute worst model. Modeling could never be a career because I'm so stiff and I just hold everything wrong. And so they were like, okay, let's put some music on and loosen her up. So they said, what kind of music can I play? Listen, Flashlight, One Nation Under the Groove. I'm grooving. I'm fun, right? So yeah, I love old school music. 70s music is my thing. Funk is my favorite genre of music. So you don't have time for all the answers, but we'll start with Parliament.
The last time I was in Chicago, I went to a funk-themed coffee shop that was in the Ukrainian village. It was for Dark Matter Coffee, and it was called the Mothership. And it was entirely painted in Afrofuturism funk scenes. It was absolutely great, and nothing like listening to Parliament Funkadelic at 7 a.m. when you're getting your espresso.
All day. Listen, and I can't wait to go there because dark coffee, funk music, Afrofuturism, it sounds great.
Oh, it was great. It was an absolutely
Thank you.
great time.
The
And-
Mothership.
Yeah. So there's so much stuff we could talk about, and I'm sure we will in future episodes, but we should focus on this mayoral debate that happened over the weekend at Eastside Community Network. Packed house. We also streamed it live on YouTube, where we've gotten a bunch of viewers there. It has been quite the journey, the good, positive journey, but a lot of work putting together this debate by everybody to do this thing, whether it's ECN, Outlier, our team at Daily Detroit that did the technical support. Shout out to, of course, Norris, who was helping out, and then Randy Walker and Adam Cook, who helped us with some of the stuff behind the scenes. I always want to make sure to shout out those who do the work, taping down cables on the floor and making everything go. There was a lot of hours of literal sweat making that stuff go. So I want to make sure to shout
Yes, it was amazing. You guys did an amazing
The
job.
room looked absolutely beautiful. Shout out to you guys.
Yeah, well, and of course, the team over at ECN as well, and getting all the chairs up and everything else. And so it was a really good event. I think I don't want to toot our own horn too much here, but I do believe it was one of, if not the most substantive debates.
That's what I'm hearing. People said they thought it was very substantive. I'm proud of a couple of things. First of all, the substance. And all of the candidates felt like they'd been treated fairly. And I think that's what you want to see happen. And then, after LaDuff kind of lowered the expectations, I think that we more than raised them. People really did follow the rules. They didn't. Orlando said not a lot of clapping. Every once in a while they clap a little bit and then catch themselves and stop. And so I thought we had a real cooperative and professional audience. I was really proud.
Well, that's also a credit to you, Orlando Bailey, because you have that energy where people are like, all right, we are in service now.
Well, I grew up in the Black church in the city of Detroit, and so I understand and know how to command the audience, especially an Eastside audience. And so thank you to, first off, of course, thanks to the teams that made it happen at Authentically Detroit, Outlier, Daily Detroit, and ECN. But it would have been not the success it was had people not shown up. People really did show up in great number on a Saturday. on a Saturday,
rainy
people on a
Saturday.
rainy Saturday morning. And so I want to make sure that we acknowledge all of the folks who gave up their time to be and to share space with us on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think for me, I also want to thank the candidates who came out and gave us their time and answered the questions, not just from us, but as we source questions from our community and so on and so forth. I thought it was not just a substantive debate, but I thought it was a debate that allowed us to kind of see more into the visceral reaction of good information. And what I mean by that is not leaning into this gotcha stuff and getting people to, scream and yell at each other, to actually have a moment to sit down and talk about these are the things that are important to citizens of the city of Detroit. And I thought we really got a lot out of that from this debate.
I received a text message from Stacy Clayton at Wayne State, who said that this was by far the most substantive debate, and she complimented us and, said you didn't have the gotcha questions, and that's not what you want. This is the most important mayoral election of my lifetime. I really do believe that because as this election goes, our city's going to go. There's a couple of reasons why for me. There's so many ideas out there. This, universe of ideas of how to improve the city is now opened back up. And no matter who wins, we've at least exposed ourselves and the community to that. And so really honing in on that, we got a couple assurances that I thought were really important around the commitments to water affordability and property tax justice that really matter as well. I mean, everybody sort of lined up on the side of justice in the debate. Now, there were a couple of people who did not come. And I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that we had 6 candidates commit and 4 who followed their commitments. And one person said, well, you can't be anywhere. And I said, well, if you break a campaign promise while you're still campaigning, it's a little rough. It's hard for me to really have confidence that you would not also just blow me off if you became mayor. And I mean, I'm not saying that we're everything, but we had a sizable Eastside group that was there. We have some people who are, part of popular media in Detroit podcasts. I mean, how many listeners do you have at Daily Detroit?
Thousands.
Yeah, we have no idea how many we have. Orlando's over Outlier Media. And so we're people who have a presence in this community. Our organization, where it's hosted, is 40 years old. So I do take it personally when people think you can blow us off. And I think if you can blow us off, you can blow off any other citizen in the city of Detroit.
Well, I think it also is part of understanding that the landscape has changed, that there will be people tuning in to different sources in different ways. One thing I was really glad about was to be able to get into a conversation around things like housing, but housing beyond, say, the apartment blocks, right? I know that there is a section of our listenership that's really into that urban density, and there is a place for that. But when you're talking about the breadth of the city of Detroit and trying to make things more accessible and also making it so people stay in the city, having stuff that's a little bit less density, whether it's single family or something close to that. I live in a neighborhood that's zoned for duplex housing, which can be a really powerful tool for lifting up your own wealth, where you buy you buy a duplex and then you're able to rent out, say, the lower unit, and you're able to help your own financial state. There's so many things and questions with housing that we need to be able to look at with different angles and how we approach these resources. How do we apply those resources between not just what's the most quote unquote cost effective, but what is actually going to get people to stay here and choose here, right? Because it's not going to be, as I said, there is a place for apartments, but it's not, if you build only studios and 1 bedrooms, those people are not going to stay here.
What I found to be amazing, though, is that we got multiple commitments from these candidates to have a focus on single family housing. And I think that's nothing to snooze at, because the strategy with the current administration has not been single family rebuild, has not been single family acquisition rehab. Multiple candidates said on Saturday that they want more single family housing and they want more single family construction. And some of them talked about different ways to do that. I heard modular homes mentioned, and I heard other forms of financing mentioned. But the fact that mayoral candidates are talking about strengthening the single family housing stock in the city is news.
It is news, and not just leaning into the single family home stock that they hope to build, but continue to support the single family home stock that exists now.
Absolutely.
One of the major questions was around environmental justice, particularly around flooding, and one of the big issues that a lot of homeowners have. We just had a major pipe burst in Southwest Detroit that, displaced many people for almost a month, and they couldn't get back to their homes. And not just
some people still aren't back,
and still aren't back, and not just rebuilding the infrastructure, but also supporting the repairs for some of those homes. That's going to be vital as people move into the homing stock that already exists. Many of these homes will be 80, 100, 120 years old, and someone will need that support. And so to hear candidates want to further their commitments to allowing people to repair and maintain those older homes is going to be critical into the decision making of people wanting to live in the city of Detroit.
First show me what you think and how you feel about things, and then I'll see what you do. Nobody knows what next year is going to look like if we're going to be honest. But I want to know what you will prioritize if you become mayor next year. I don't know what resources are available, but when you agree that you're going to focus on those things, it makes a big difference. Detroit has always prided itself, long-term Detroit has always prided ourselves on our single-family homes. It's a single-family home city. We pride ourselves on our neighborhoods, and people are like, what neighborhood are you from and what high school are you from? And that's part of our identity. And to see that sort of shifted wasn't good. I appreciated the shout out to READ, the organization that supports Black developers, because I think that we also want to make sure that we are providing the kind of economic fairness where Black developers are invited in to participate, not because they are Black developers, because you can't, according to Michigan state law, differentiate. But when you have the kind of development plans that only focus on downtown, you necessarily squeeze out small scale developers, those people who are willing to do the work and get inside the homes. And also, of course, nonprofit developers like myself. We're a small-scale housing developer, but we're here and we're willing to do the work. And the difference between us and others is that we're not looking for profit. So getting those kind of commitments from candidates felt good.
And I have talked to a number of smaller developers of color but they're doing work in the suburbs because it's just too hard to do it in the city. And that's a shame, because if that work's being done 6 miles from here, 7 miles, wherever, why isn't it being done here? And then we have to ask ourselves, yes, construction prices are more expensive. Yes, labor is more expensive, whatever. But if you're pulling it off in a suburb, why aren't you pulling it off here? And what do we need to do to enable that? And they're not getting huge amounts of incentives and things like that. And with these smaller developments, whether you're doing a single family home, a duplex or a triplex or something, that's something that a investor can do on a smaller scale, and you don't have to be halfway to a billionaire to get it done.
No, you
should we? I'm sorry, I don't know if we said it. I think we should mention which candidate showed up. So Mary Sheffield showed up, Santil Jenkins showed up, Fred Durhal showed up, Todd Perkins showed up, Solomon Kinlock confirmed and then backed out about a week and a half before the debate. James Craig backed out the night before without citing a reason.
Yeah. So. And the explanation that that Solomon Kinlock gave for backing out was actually pretty insulting to us. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we scheduled this debate with him earlier than we did anybody else. We knew he had, the church schedule and the campaign schedule. And so we confirmed that this was a good date. And the feedback that we got was, the day after, Adam should have told you that was not going to work for me. That doesn't work for me. Because after we scheduled that, we then sat down and interviewed him and reconfirmed then. When I was at the Mackinac Policy Conference, I reconfirmed then. What it feels like was, we have thousands of people we can reach. And you don't want to reject the hundreds of people for the thousands. And I think it's probably 1,000 people.
Well, there's already more than 1,000 people on the YouTube alone.
And, you can't be the people's candidate and then tell the people they're not important enough. Because you made it to WDIV, you even made it all the way up to Mackinac. You can make it here, and it would have just been a couple of hours. And so I said, I would rather disappoint a few thousand people by saying I'm going to be late or I'm going to have to delay this than, disappoint us and break a promise. Craig.
He is not kissing the rings of people who decide that they speak on behalf of other people.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm like him. Right? Because he has his bigger ring. I got a big ring and you got a little ring, so I don't have to kiss your little ring because I'm a big ring guy. I mean, when people start using the logic that people like you, people like all of us speak on behalf of other people, and people are kissing our rings as though it's not hard work, as though we're not out there in the streets and doing all of the grunt work necessary to get it. I don't dismiss having 35,000 or however many members and, helicoptering from church to church, because that's a lot of work too. But I think it's important for us to understand that the work that we do is also less well compensated, perhaps. And there is this tendency that I've seen in recent times to sort of say to people in the community, block club leaders and community association leaders, that organizations like mine that have been around for 40 years are expecting to be treated a certain kind of way, and they get all of the money and you don't get as much money, and they play us against each other. not recognizing that our organization gives out money to a lot of these organizations. When we raise money, we pay stipends to people who live in the community, and we invest in their capacity. And so it's not us versus them. It's all of us together. But when I see people play those kind of class politics and try to compare people, I also think that's dangerous for our well-being.
Well, I think that the people who went to this debate got treated to a wide variety of questions.
Absolutely.
And so I think, why don't we go around the table? We'll start with you, Norris. What was the key thing, each of you, a key thing that you are glad, or something you came in that you're glad that you learned?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm glad that I learned about is kind of talking a little bit about how we're going to, the prioritization of retaining and attracting new talent, right? Because a refrain that I hear a lot, or that I say a lot in daily Detroit and elsewhere, is that a lot of our issues are also issues of numbers. And having more people here is going to begin to help ease some of the issues that we have in the city of Detroit. However, nobody ever sat down and started talking about plans. I didn't hear previous to this debate a lot of people's plans on what they tend to focus on. And so, I got a little bit of that, and I appreciated that. I know Durhal spoke about his working with schools and stuff like that. But ultimately, getting more people to the city is something that's important to me. And each candidate had their ideas, but I'm still looking for a little bit more on that.
I will talk about the initial question that I asked that, presented a place-based problem in Jefferson Chalmers around flooding. And we also recognize that there are other neighborhoods in the city that tend to flood as well. But I was really encouraged that the candidates had their arms around that issue, at least their brains around it. They were able to talk intelligently to it. They knew about the floodplain designation. They knew that the floodplain designation prohibits a lot of grant funding and a lot of government funding from being able to go into Jefferson Chalmers to actually fix the problem and help remove that designation. They were thinking creatively around how to mobilize residents and get rid of that floodplain designation because it's so prohibitive. Number one, if you live over there, it's really hard to get flood insurance or even homeowners insurance, period. But the fact that they acknowledged a lot of the work that community had been doing over there with their different projects, whether it was the water project, they understand some of the studies that the Army Corps of Engineers have done and have some disagreement, And so I like that they're thinking about it and the fact that they were able to speak intelligently to what's happening in Jefferson Chalmers. But we also know that flooding is a problem in Southwest and in Brightmoor, and they were able to speak more broadly in that sense. And so I'm really hopeful that it's more than just a platitude and it's more than just a campaign promise, but because this has really consequential effects to the quality of life in Detroit neighborhoods. People, when I was at ECN, I told Donna this, when it rained on the east side, my phone would ring off the hook because residents were afraid because it was raining every single time it rained. And so that's something that's near and dear to my heart. My family came from the Delta of Mississippi and landed on Algonquin Street in Jefferson Chalmers. The house is still in our family today. So it means a great deal to me.
I have to go listen to the debate again, because I really felt like there was one candidate who really understood those issues and brought up reversing the floodplain designation. That's Mary Sheffield.
Yeah.
She was the one who really talked about that because I think she has been most involved in leading in that area. Other candidates sort of showed some affinity towards that, but she knew who Jay Jerkinson was and she recognized him by name. And I've heard feedback that she was very general, and that was an area where I thought her specific knowledge was very helpful. She recognized Letitia Johnson, her work there, and so our city council person for District 4.
Who also showed up to the debate.
Yeah, she
Thank
did.
you, Councilman Johnson.
She did.
Councilwoman Johnson.
But, I think that, in 2021, in 2020, when the floodplain designation took place and people were trying to fight back in our community, and the mayor said, well, it would be too expensive to get us out of a floodplain. And I went to a meeting waiting for plans to be shared with the community, and the plans were never shared transparently. People were told they had to get flood insurance, and flood insurance is very expensive. It comes from FEMA. And to get this flood insurance, you can't pay over time every month. You have to pay a lump sum at the beginning of the year, right after Christmas. when we don't have any money, right? I mean, if you celebrate Christmas, you don't have any money in January, but you have to pay thousands of dollars up front in order to keep a mortgage. And so people are at risk of losing their mortgages. There are some real serious issues, and I think there's a perception in the area that you're trying to gentrify, but also all of those buildings on Jefferson, East Jefferson, they're trying to get HUD funding, and you can't get HUD funding to improve projects in a floodplain. And so it really put all of the redevelopment projects that our partners at JEI had on hold. And so I'm hopeful that all of those candidates will be aware. Some of them have more access to information, perhaps, so all of them will be aware and sensitive to it. I think my disappointment was around the transportation question.
Yes.
To be honest, that
Yes.
was the
Yeah. That's what I wanted to hop on.
worst question. I'm sorry to go to the negative, but
I was going to get there. Don't worry. But we can go there right now.
Give your positive first. and
Oh,
then
my
we'll get there.
positive.
Yeah.
I really loved the last question. We talked about the tax crisis, and people said, we're going to go to Lansing and try to change the law. We're going to try to get legislation to make people whole.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Mary Sheffield on that question. in
Yes,
particular.
I felt so much. I'm so passionate. And she has been, again, to her credit, a soldier in that fight with Bernadetta Tuahene. I think it's only fair to say that she's been standing side by side trying to get legislation passed at the city level, more so than any other politician in this community. And so as we criticize her, and there's some things to criticize her about, that's not one of them.
Yeah, but I definitely wanted to loop back around because we talked about transportation, and I just want to say, for me, as somebody who has left the city and come back, public transportation is something that separates us from many world-class cities. And to hear virtually each candidate just say, we just need more bus drivers, it just...
That's not enough.
Not only is it not enough, it is, in my opinion, quite insulting to the voter, and especially to those who ride the bus, because even if we get more routes and we get the nice, clean electric buses, that doesn't necessarily fix that some of the routes flat out just need to be redrawn. It doesn't stop the fact that you need more bus shelters, and many of those bus shelters need to be heated bus shelters. But again, now we get into a money question. But beyond that, none of that
Or
is...
an infrastructure question too, Norris, because the council wanted to allocate even more dollars than they did in this last budget. And the director of the Department of Transportation said, we rejected it. I don't know if y'all remember this story, but the director of transportation, DDOT, said, we can't spend or use all of the funds that you want to give us. So bring that number down.
Which is a leadership issue.
It's
because
crazy.
The reality is, because here's the thing about it. We gave them a cheat sheet. They didn't have to come up with ideas. We said, how about dedicated bus lines, micro transit? We gave them one of them could have picked up on one of those things and said, let's look at this. Instead, I'm hearing we're going to extend, and I think this was Mary, this is the criticism. We're going to extend the Q line a couple miles more. It's like, what's that going to fix? When you look at the cost of increasing the size of rail.
And the thing is, though, is that if you are going to do rail, you don't want to expand the system that is the Q line. Because if you've gone to other cities and worked in other cities and you've seen what a efficient rail system looks like, it doesn't look like the Q line. But
the cost is prohibitive.
Well, it is, but so I hear you on the cost, but I also think the idea of, I think we need to think with a vision. So yes, right now that cost is prohibitive. And yes, I think that buses are a step when bus rapid transit and things like that. But I would like to see something where it's a vision for the future. Like, okay, you know what, some years down the line, if we see that bus rapid transit really works on this corridor, let's think about these permanent investments to get people where they need to go.
Well, why not bus rapid transit citywide? We have 139 square miles, and you have many, many depopulated neighborhoods. Am I concerned about solutions like that? When I worked in Brightmoor, you had to walk a mile to get to the first bus stop. And the reality is that we could have microtransit systems that take people from there to a bus route that's rapid transit. All these bike lanes, we could have dedicated bus lanes. Dedicated bus lanes will really move the system along. And so I don't mind a big vision, but the in-between vision for the people who can't afford to get on the bus right now is as important to me as long-term. Let's do rail.
Yeah, and that was the issue with me, because I didn't hear any creativity in the solution. What I heard was just an extension of a solution that's already not working, right? So for me, while we talk about bus rapid transit, I think the extension of the Q line is folly, but to me, the future of whatever transit is going to be, especially if it's rail centric, will probably have to come through a public-private partnership. As much as a lot of people, I think, don't like to hear that, I think that's the only way, based off cost, that it happens. But even if it does, there is so much information and case study about how to make street level rail work. So many other places.
Show me the studies to where you can invest in it right now, because I think what I've seen is it's cost prohibitive for 139 square miles. San Francisco has had that for some time, and I think what we do is we make good the enemy of great, because we're unwilling to even do those things that other cities like Cleveland and Columbus and Grand Rapids have done that have made transit possible, because we are holding out for rail. My mother grew up in a Detroit that had streetcars, but that's a long time ago.
Well, so I agree with you in a lot of points, but I think that there's what the city can do and then what a regional transit authority using regional dollars could do.
Which
and those
we
are two
can't
different
get funded.
things. Well, that's the
Or
but you see,
whenever we do that, we end up with the
Or
Q
pass
line of the
on a
people
ballot
mover.
measure.
We end up with the Q line of the people mover. There's absolutely no political will to take rail on the east side of Detroit down Warren Avenue or down Mack Avenue or down Harper Avenue where people live and work. But you have bus lines that are there. If we could dedicate bus lanes like we dedicate bike lanes.
I don't think there would be rail down. I think the only places you would ever see rail is Gratiot, Michigan.
It's the major spoke roads.
You'd never see. It would be buses. It would definitely be
How
buses.
much of this is an issue for the Department of Transportation to take up versus or in concert with the Detroit Planning and Development Department and the Michigan Department of Transportation? Because I think this is as much of a planning issue for planning and development as it is a transportation issue. And I think it's limited for the candidates to only speak about the transportation in the way that they did in talking about the
and that was the
numbers.
frustrating part.
And I guess because I'm, again, old school, right? I want to live to see public transportation work in our city.
Yeah.
And at this point, when I look at the price tag of projects and I look at the fact that we can't afford things right now, I don't think I will. I look at what other cities are doing. I actually worked on this. I went to Sweden a couple of years ago, and we were looking at what other communities are doing across the world, and those microtransit options and other things are being incorporated into bus systems. I'm teaching, at Columbia University. I'm taking next semester off. But I've had students propose projects that show how we could reorganize our transit and afford it. If we can do that first and have leadership that says, what can we do with what we have right now? We can always plan for something bigger.
And I think we can do a lot with $211 million in the DDOT budget. So there is a transportation budget in our $3 billion budget of $211 million toward transportation. We can do more than just hire more drivers with that.
Flat out.
And we can convert some of these bike lanes to bus lanes. Where the bike lanes are underutilized in many places, bus lines are needed, and a lot of people have been demanding that.
Well, and the reality is that although I am a fan of bike lanes in certain situations, a lot of bike lanes were used as a way to calm traffic. Like that was the actual reason for a lot of it, is to make it so that you don't have a street that's so wide without deleting part of the street, so people reduce speeding. Like that's the reality of a lot of those lanes that were created, is to make it so that you slow down people, because we both remember a Detroit where there was even more speeding, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I think that if you really look at, again, I think I would want our mayor to benchmark other big cities with budgets like ours, with physical layout like ours, and with current transportation resources, because infrastructure dollars are decreasing over time, and figure out what has worked in other places and bring those ideas here, but also somebody who intimately understands new technology, understands these people in this community and how the city works.
I think another political reality is that we're the home of the automobile, right? We got Stellantis, we got Ford, and we have GM who are here. And I don't know if there will ever be enough political will here in the city of Detroit to really.
And I think also, I think it was Santil Jenkins who said it, is that there's still the social stigma in the city around public transit that would have to be
for poor people.
Yeah, it had to be eradicated as well for a lot of these projects, even the smaller micro projects that you're talking about, Donna, to continue to get funding within the city because and to get the usage that is needed in the
I
city.
don't know.
in
Maybe
order
I'm
to justify
crazy,
it.
but I think if Ford, GM, and Chrysler were all like, we need this and we need it yesterday.
And what happened yesterday?
They would, but I don't even think they have the power they used to have. I'm being honest with you. If Dan Gilbert says we need this and we need
They
this
don't.
yesterday,
And also, General Motors' center of employment is no longer the city of Detroit.
and so
It's
they don't
Warren.
have the political power that they used to have. And also, young people want mass transit in Detroit. Young people are not car centric in the way that people my age are. You know, people my age is like, are you a Ford person, a GM person? I mean, you even had your favorite car, manufacturer, and that was your identity. That's shifting, and I think as young people take charge, this is why we need young leadership, because young leaders are going to make different kinds of demands than people my age. I've heard older people criticize this, and we still get our identity from our cars. But I want to see young people in charge. And, the great thing about every candidate who is there, except for one on Saturday, is that they're all younger, I think, than this current mayor, at least many of them are younger than this current mayor. I think we're going to get a younger mayor. I think we're going to get a mayor who is more connected to the people in this community and will be listening better. And hopefully will, hire somebody who does a better job. But let's talk about some of the other issues. There were so many issues that we discussed.
I think the one issue for me that I guess I didn't hear more of, and obviously the questioning was very centered around the city of Detroit and the specific issues that a mayor will have to tackle kind of in the first day. But for me, I didn't hear enough about, what could be potentially happening with cooperation with both Lansing and Washington. This is still one of the most important cities in the nation. We're always thrust into the national spotlight every time something happens, whether it pertains to large African-American cities, whether it pertains to funding for major cities, whether it pertains to and now starting to pertain to environmental justice as we sit in the Great Lakes as well. I kind of wanted to hear more about what candidates' sort of vision between both regional, state, and national cooperation.
If Craig had been there,
be.
he would have just said, "I'll pick up the phone."
Exactly.
But I will say too that some of the things even that they talked about as far as plans need Michigan legislature
and
cooperation.
that's my point.
And to me, it's like if you're banking your plan on cooperation with the legislature, the Michigan legislature doing something that Detroit expressly wants is a uphill climb.
And
Well, that's why I always ask the question whenever we interview mayoral candidates, what is your legislative policy agenda for Lansing? Because that kind of coordination and that kind of lobbying looks very different than going to the city council table lobbying more locally.
And they did in a couple instances speak to that, whether it's new revenue generation or whether it was a tax. Can we talk about the downtown versus neighborhood development and how that question was answered? I'm going to tell you the absolute worst question, in my view, came from Durhal, who wants to expand the Downtown Development Authority and create community, commercial
Corridor Improvement Authority.
Corridor Improvement Authorities. First of all, there's already Corridor Improvement Authority legislation. Secondly, you cannot balance out the wealth between downtown and neighborhoods by expanding the boundaries of the Downtown Development Authority and making it bigger. Right now, what is happening is so much money is spent downtown and kept downtown, it will be impossible for any neighborhood to catch up.
Oh, I hard disagree.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. There is not enough economic activity happening in downtown Detroit to fill the neighborhoods.
That's my point.
I think a lot of people view downtown as this area that's all of this economic activity. There are tons of vacant lots around here. This downtown, if you travel, is nowhere near full. There should be 100,000 more people in the 7.2 square miles of downtown Detroit.
Who will those people be?
You know what?
Rich white people.
Who cares?
But I do.
But who cares? I don't care. No,
I care.
this is
Who are we building for?
Okay, then tell me the people from Southfield are moving back in.
Because they're not.
Well, you know why? You know why they aren't? I'll tell you. I have a daughter who was purchasing a home a couple years ago and was looking for a home, and it would be cheaper for her to live in Southfield than live in Farmington, to live in most Detroit neighborhoods. And so the reality is, unless we fix up our neighborhood housing, unless we build housing in the neighborhoods, if we take 100% or 90% of our dollars we have to subsidize housing and say, let's put it downtown. And and you look at who's moving there. You may not care, but I care that Detroit's Black community is being sacrificed because the people who are moving downtown are by and large not native Detroiters, not Black, and not families. And so for me, as a longtime legacy Detroiter, I feel as though we're being sacrificed. The second issue is 90% of the developers downtown are white developers, are white men who have a huge bankrolls. And so what we're doing is we're shifting wealth, and wealth creation downtown is benefiting a subset of the population. I think it needs to be more mixed. I don't think we should stop wealth creation downtown. I don't think we should stop white people from moving in. They're moving into neighborhoods too. But what I think is that if we want a balanced city and we want justice, we've got to figure out what are the engines of justice? What are the engines of development? We have neighborhoods that are starved of that, and we can't pretend as though the resources can be in two places at one time. And so
and
my
Michigan,
question is, go ahead.
I was just getting ready to say the Michigan Strategic Fund had this surplus of opera dollars that they gave out in the form of grants. I think it was back in 22 or 23. And I was at Bruce Detroit at the time, and we did a story on how all of those grantees
100%
were non-black developers.
Downtown.
I agree.
Downtown.
I agree with you. However, we're not going to get there with public dollars.
Well, but
We're not going to get anywhere near where we need to be with public dollars. It's not coming from the state. It's not. Even if they gave us all the dollars, that's nowhere near enough to ignite the amount of jobs that are required to get the household income of Detroiters from where it is to where we need to go.
The household income of Detroiters in most neighborhoods has not increased at all. When we see household incomes increase, we're talking about household incomes downtown because, of course, downtown is attracting in younger, professional, majority white people. And so what we're seeing is an increase that masks the fact that you don't have an increase in the neighborhoods. And if you don't have an increase in the neighborhoods, you have a decrease. If your household, if the median income is not increasing in 4215 and hasn't increased substantially in the past 9 years since I've been to Eastside Community Network, then in real dollar terms, it's decreasing. And so we can gloss and we can say, well, it's going to trickle down. Wealth does not trickle down. And I'm not talking about public, I'm talking about public dollars, my tax dollars. If the tax dollars that are growing downtown can only be spent downtown, 100% of them can be only spent downtown, then what that says is that, and you know what? Those tax dollars are not paying for the policing that takes place downtown. I'm told you, I'm going to be downtown for the fireworks tonight, but those police officers are not being paid for by the Downtown Development Authority. Willie Mae Gaskin on the east side of Detroit, who can't get police to show up at her house, is paying for police to be downtown there because this is where they matter.
Census data shows Detroit has more than 7,200 downtown residents, an increase of about 45% since 2011. The vast majority of downtown housing is filled with renters. Of the approximately 4,500 downtown residential units, the DDP estimates only around 300 are owner-occupied. Millennials are the dominant generation living downtown. 61% of residents are between the age of 19 and 34. The data shows around 40% of downtown residents are Black, despite making up 77% of the city's population.
Can I give you a caveat on that data?
Go for it.
It's 1 square mile.
Yes.
That's no. So I'm talking about the greater downtown of 7.2 square miles, first off. Okay, so that includes Lafayette Park, Corktown, Riverfront, Midtown,
New Center,
all that.
But the Downtown Development Authority dollars do not go there.
And that's why we need to expand it, because it should go farther.
But the point is, if you
This is
expand
fun.
it, then
Now,
what
this
you
is fun.
expand it is you say, you know what?
And you know what? You
We're
need one
not-
too. You need one on Connor, so that you can take the dollars, capture them, and deploy them.
But the thing is, unless people are spending stimulus money on Connor is not going to see the values of
Stimulus money won't get us there.
But you know what? So what you're saying is, let's take the Downtown Development Authority and let's make it encapsulate the entire wealthier areas of downtown surrounding there, so that all of those people
And the money will
can
come
live
back
in-
through income tax.
It will not come back through income tax. Income taxes have not replaced that money, and a whole lot of the people who live downtown don't claim downtown development residents, which is why Mayor Duggan was trying to get a list of people who live downtown from these apartment building owners, these renters, because they still live at home with their mama. And so the reality is, when you look at depopulation, if you lose one family of 4 people and you get one person, the reality is we're also losing census dollars tied to the census, because people are leaving. And so I think that we're just going to have to agree to disagree that racial justice cannot happen when resources are protected and captured away from the people who have been legacy Detroiters and are not benefiting today.
But the last thing I'm gonna say, and I think we always get caught up in data and we get caught up on what we should be talking about. But I am one of those people that is absolutely a longtime Detroiter, born and raised here, grew up in Brightmoor, left for 2 years, couldn't stand it, and moved right on back to the city and went right downtown. I think if we need to focus more in on that person, the person who falls in my cohort, the person who is the mid to late 30s. Obviously, we're going to attract a little bit younger people, but at the end of the day, all the factors that we're talking about, whether it's talking about older buildings that we're going to be able to help you repair, moving downtown so you can have a more urbanized environment, moving to a different neighborhood that may be just outside of downtown that you're able to get a little bit of parcel of land. All of these things need to work in concert, because ultimately at the end of the day, and Donna, this is where
we are building Detroit for you.
This is where I will disagree with you, because I like seeing people who don't necessarily look like me downtown.
I do too.
I enjoy that quite a bit because I grew up here. And so I could go 2-3 weeks and not see a white or Latino person.
Norris, I am so privileged. I am so privileged. I'm going to agree with you. I am so privileged. I can go downtown to downtown eateries and have a good meal. I'm doing that tonight, right? I'm going to stay at the Western Hotel, and we're going to be at Andiamo's tonight. I love that, okay? But my job, my profession is leading a community development corporation that supports people who cannot afford any of that. And so while I can look at my privilege and say I want more of it, I have to also balance my privilege with the lack of privilege of the people I serve. People whose homes cannot afford to be fixed up. People who are living in homes that their families have owned for generations, and there are no longer drywall on the walls because they're in such bad condition. Not just a few homes, but U of M predicted 38,000 homes in the city of Detroit are in dangerously poor condition. We have a home repair grant, and we can't fix up most of the homes, or many of the homes we look at, because they're in too poor condition to be repaired. And so if we don't look at that as a justice issue, and we say, well, this is not the purpose of the public dollar in Detroit, then we're just going to disagree. And so I think it's fine. There's reasonable people can disagree on
Can
things.
I infer something? First off, I have really enjoyed this discussion and this debate. It really is a substantive one. I do believe, though, the one thing that I would infer is that leaving this issue up to the whims of the free market has never worked out for Black people. It has the free market has never worked out for Black people, especially in this city. And I think we have to be very honest about that. It will take some engineering of market. It will take a huge investment from the public and private purse to make this work for everybody. And leaving it up to the free market will continue to leave Black people on the margin.
On that, I'll 1,000% agree.
And that is my point. My point is not let's stop downtown development. My point is not let's stop bring people here. Yay, I love downtown. I live in Rivertown.
I'll be downtown.
I'll
be down there.
I love nothing more than the Riverwalk. The Riverwalk, if my knee was not messed up, I'd be on there almost every day.
Yeah.
I can love those things and appreciate those things, and also understand that we've got to figure out a way to achieve balance. I'm not saying stop having a downtown development authority. But what I'm saying is if we allow all of those resources, $60 million a year, to remain captured in the downtown development authority, while we tell people we can't afford to fix your sidewalks, we can't afford to tear down this dead tree. Now, the candidates on Saturday said they would do it all.
But to Durhal's point, in terms of revitalizing the commercial corridors in some of the neighborhoods, how does that not essentially create little small authorities across the city that allow those dollars to matriculate per neighborhood?
Because let me say what that happens.
Continuation of the strategic neighborhood investment.
It's exactly what that is. And so if you look at neighborhood corridors, right? We work on one. I'm on the MAC corridor. The MAC corridor is not going to generate enough revenue to do more than it can.
I actually commissioned a study from DEGC back in 2017.
And since then we've done 3 more studies. We're partnering with Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe, and Grosse Pointe Farms, because I'm not anti-rich people, right? Mm-hmm. Let's work together. Let's figure out a way to leverage each other's resources. But I will say this: you're not going to get enough revenue to, first of all, to fix up that corridor. But even if you do, it doesn't spill over into neighborhoods, because people in neighborhoods don't live on corridors, and corridor improvement authorities have money that is restricted to the corridor itself. And so what you're doing is leaving the neighborhoods, the bread and butter legacy Detroiters, their homes, their community centers, their schools, their libraries behind in the name of progress. Progress can be inclusive. But inclusivity is intentional. And what I didn't hear was
and it's
intentionality.
often antithetical to the free market.
Yes.
I know time is short. People have got meetings that they've got to go to. I hate to cut this all short. Before we go, let's talk about the results of the polling that you did at the debate.
People coming in, they had their top choices coming in. Fred Durhal sat at first place. Santil Jenkins at second place. Undecided, third place. Mary Sheffield, fourth place. Todd Perkins in fifth place.
And this was before the debate began.
This was before the debate. Leaving the debate, Fred Durhal was still in first place. Santil Jenkins, second place. Mary Sheffield, third place. Undecided, fourth place. Todd Perkins, sixth place.
What I noticed in that data was people moved out of the undecided column.
People did move out of the undecided column, and this is 106 respondents in our very unscientific poll that we took.
Scientific poll.
So there we go.
But, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted people to move into places. And I will say this, Fred Durhal is a really good debater.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah, his strength in the legislature shows. Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks
coming.
for having us.
Absolutely. Donna Givens Davidson, I appreciate you. I know we don't always agree on things.
That's okay.
But I appreciate you so much. All the work that you have done. Without you, so many things would not have happened. And I appreciate that we can have these discussions. And this pushback is healthy because it's going to be how we get to a great answer.
Yes,
Completely
say it
agree.
again.
I completely agree. I think that, debate is how we get places. That's why I enjoyed our debate on Saturday, because we did have a real debate with real answers and real questions. And I appreciate you so much for everything that you did to support Norris. I love you too.
Of course.
Orlando's my friend. So this was good. And let's continue having these conversations because Detroiters deserve to hear all of this information in one place.
And Orlando Bailey, always good to see you.
Good to see you.
Absolutely. Norris Howard?
You know it, man.
All right, we are done with this episode of Your Daily Detroit. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our members on Patreon. Local media needs local support to survive and thrive. Feedback, as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Yell at me, tell me I'm wrong. That's absolutely fine. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.